Welcome to the world of science fiction Neon's Alien. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Neon's Alien universe. The desert sky was dark, filled with thick clouds and red lightning. The wind howled like an angry beast. In the middle of the storm, a girl ran barefoot, her skin burned, her legs shaking, her arms bleeding. She had no weapons, no food, no water. Only one thing in her heart: escape. Her name was Nira, though she had not heard it spoken kindly in 10 long years. The slave traders who owned her never used it. They called her it, thing, or beast. She had been chained since she was a child, beaten, starved, caged. Tonight she had broken free. The camp was in flames behind her. She had set the fire herself. She had waited years for a chance, and when the guard fell asleep drunk, she stole. His key unlocked her collar and poured oil across the tents. Now she was running through the sand, chased by fear, chased by freedom. Her feet bled as she climbed a rocky hill. Sharp stones tore her soles, but she didn't stop. Pain was nothing. She had lived with pain for so long it felt like a shadow. The real danger was behind her. The slave. Master would come, he always did, and he would punish her worse than ever before. But tonight, Nira made a promise to herself. I will die a free girl, or live one. She reached the top of the hill and looked around. Only endless desert, no cities, no light, no help. Then, lightning struck far away, and in that flash, she saw it. A cabin, a small broken home hidden between rocks. Smoke rose from a tiny chimney. A human lived there. She didn't know if he was kind or cruel. She didn't care. She needed shelter. Now. Her legs gave up and she rolled down the hill, sand getting in her mouth and eyes. Her arm hit a rock. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her voice had been damaged years ago. Still, she crawled. Inch by inch, like an animal, until she reached the door. She knocked once, twice. Then everything went black. Inside the cabin, a man named Kyle sat beside a low fire. He lived alone, by choice, far from the cities, far from people. He had been a soldier once, but the war ended and the galaxy moved on without him. He was used to silence. But tonight, he heard something. Knock, knock. At first he thought it was wind. Then, bang. He stood, picked up his old blaster, and opened. The door, at his feet lying in the sand, was a girl, an alien girl. Young, starved, burned, wrapped in torn cloth. Her body was shaking. Her eyes, barely open, glowed with soft silver light. She looked up at him, then fainted. Kale didn't think. He lifted her gently and brought her inside. She was light, like a child, bones, skin, and fear. He placed her near the fire and checked for wounds, cuts, burns, rope marks on her wrists and ankles, and something else, a slave mark burned into her neck. He cursed under his breath. What the hell happened to you? She didn't answer. She was unconscious. Kale got a wet cloth and cleaned her wounds. He wrapped her arm with a bandage and gave her drops of water. He had no idea who she was, or what trouble she brought, but one thing was clear. She was running from something, and he couldn't just leave her outside to die. Hours passed. She didn't wake, but her breathing became slower, calmer. Kale sat nearby, staring at the fire. He didn't like strangers. He didn't trust aliens. But this girl, Serim, was different, not dangerous, just broken. In the morning, Nira opened her eyes. She blinked at the warm fire, the soft blanket, and the strange human sitting across the room. She gasped and pulled back, crawling into a corner. Her fingers trembled. Kyle didn't move. I'm not here to hurt you, he said slowly. She looked confused. No one had ever said that to her before. He tossed a piece of bread onto a plate and slid it toward her. "Eat," he said. She looked at the bread, then at him. She didn't touch it. Not yet. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey. She felt curious. Outside, far across the desert, a black ship flew low. A cruel voice echoed inside it. "Find the girl. Bring her back. Alive." The hunt had begun, but Nira had found fire, and she had found shelter. And for now, she was free. Nira didn't sleep much. Every time her eyes closed, she saw chains. Fire. His face. She sat in the corner of the small cabin, wrapped in a blanket she didn't trust, surrounded by walls she didn't know, and near a human she didn't understand. But something felt different here. There was no whip, no shouting, no cold floor, only quiet, only warmth. Cale didn't ask her questions. He didn't touch her again. He gave her space. He kept busy, working on machines, boiling water, fixing the broken power box on the wall. But he watched her from the side, of his eyes always watching, not with anger, but with concern. He placed food near her each morning. A metal cup of water, a fresh cloth. She didn't take it at first. She waited for the hit, the kick, the punishment. It never came. The third day, hunger won. Nira reached for the bread with shaking hands. Her eyes stayed locked on Cale the whole time. He didn't move. She took a small bite. He only nodded once, then went back to his tools. It was the first time she'd eaten without being told when to chew. Later that night, she crept closer to the fire, just a little. She watched the flames dance. They reminded her of the night she escaped, the burning tents, the light of freedom. But fire also meant danger. Kyle noticed her stare. "Scared of it?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at the flame, then at her own chest. He understood. "You ran through fire?" She nodded slowly. Kyle looked at her differently after that. Not like a lost thing, but like someone strong. The next morning, Cale found her sitting by the door, staring at the rising sun. She had never seen a sunrise without bars. He brought her a new shirt. It was too big, but clean. She didn't take it. He placed it on a chair and walked away. When he returned later, she was wearing it. She still didn't speak. But one afternoon, she picked up a small stick and drew something in the dirt. A tall man and, beside him, a small girl with no chains. Kyle looked at it. He pointed to the girl. "That's you?" She nodded. Then she drew a third thing, a broken cage, and beside that, a question mark. She tapped the stick on the cage, then looked up at him. Cale understood the question. "Why did you help me?" He didn't answer right away. He sat down, on the ground beside her, thinking. "I've seen a lot of bad things," he finally said. "Did a lot of them too." He looked her in the eyes. "I didn't want to be another monster." For a long time, they sat in silence. Then, Nira drew one last thing, a symbol, a circle, and inside it, a small flame. She tapped it once. Kyle didn't know what it meant, but she smiled, just barely, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked less afraid. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the sky. Nira jolted awake from her spot near the fire, eyes wide with fear. She curled into herself, whispering something in her own tongue. Her hands covered her ears. Kyle stood nearby. He didn't rush to her. He knelt quietly a few feet away. "I'm here," he said softly. "It's just a storm." She looked at him, shaking. "Not chains, not fire," he added. Still, she rocked slightly, like a child hiding from ghosts. So Cale did something strange. He sang, just a quiet tune, A soldier's lullaby, one his mother had once sung to him during storms on Earth. His voice wasn't pretty, but it was soft, steady, safe. Slowly, Neera stopped shaking. She leaned her head on the wall and closed her eyes. Again, this time, no nightmares. In the morning, she sat near Kale while he worked on a cracked solar panel. He passed her a tool. She hesitated, then took it. Their hands touched. She didn't pull away. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was healing, and for Kale, the man who had given up on people long ago, it was the first time in years he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Far above them, in orbit, a signal blinked. Location pinged. Runaway female detected. The slavers' men were closing in, but they didn't know. The girl they tortured for 10 years and had found someone worth fighting for. The cabin was quiet, except for the sound of soft wind blowing dust across the old windows. Neera stood near the mirror, looking at her own reflection for the first time in years. Her face looked tired. Her eyes were sunken. Her skin was covered in faint scars, small ones, long ones, old burns. But one scar stood out the most, the one on her neck. It was deep, burned, still raw in the center. The mark of a slave collar. She touched it gently, then quickly pulled her hand away. She hated it. It wasn't just pain. It was memory. Kale sat at the workbench nearby, fixing a broken transmitter. He had cleaned the girl's wounds, fed her, and given her space. But he still didn't know much about her, where she was from, what her people were called, or what they did to her. But every day, she showed signs. Little ones. She flinched at doors opening. She jumped at loud sounds. She never turned her back, and she never let anyone touch her back. That evening, Neera tried to carry a jug of water, but her arms shook. It dropped and splashed on the floor. She stepped back fast, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Kale rushed over. "It's okay. It's just water." But she backed into a corner, her body shaking, expecting to be hit. Kale froze. He slowly knelt on the floor, picked up the empty jug, and placed it aside. "I'm not angry," he said softly. She didn't believe it. Not yet. So he grabbed a towel and began to clean the spill himself. After a while, Neera knelt beside him and helped. Later that night, Kyle was working on the roof panel outside. The stars above were bright, and the air was cold. He heard a soft sound behind him. Neera stood at the door, holding something, a rolled-up cloth. She walked over slowly and handed it to him. He opened it, and inside was a broken metal tag, a slave ID. Her ID burned numbers, a scan chip, a rusted brand piece. Kyle's eyes narrowed. "They gave you a number?" Neera nodded. Then she pointed to the sky. "From where?" he asked. She drew a curved shape with her fingers, a crescent moon, then tapped her chest. "Her home." "Go on." Kyle placed the tag down. "I don't care what they called you, what they did." He looked her in the eyes. "You're not a number here." She stared at him, then took the broken tag and dropped it into the fire. The flames swallowed it whole. She didn't look away. The next morning, Kale noticed something new. Neera had drawn on the wall near her sleeping mat. A small drawing using a stick and dust. It showed her, young, small, chained. Then a hand, reaching. Then two figures beside fire. One tall, one small, no chains. Kale stared at it. "You drew me?" he asked. She nodded, then pointed to herself and held up 3 fingers. Kale was confused. 3? She tapped the wall. 1 figure with chains, 1 without. And the 3rd? She pointed to her chest, then drew a tiny flame. Inside the small figure's heart, Kale finally understood. "You're changing." Neera nodded. "Not just outside, inside too. Later, Cale tried to repair a cracked blade. It was alien tech, something he picked off an old shipwreck. Useless to him. Nira came over and picked it up. Her hands moved slowly over the device. She pressed. 2 points together. Click, it lit up, just for a second. Kyle raised his eyebrows. You know this tech? She nodded. Were you trained? She didn't answer, but her eyes told him the truth. She had once been much more than a slave. That night she couldn't sleep. The mark on her neck burned again, though the wound was closed. She stepped outside, wrapped in a blanket. Cale followed her quietly. She sat on a rock near the fire pit, silent, still. He joined her but said nothing. After a long pause, she turned slightly and pulled down the back of her shirt. Cale froze. Her back was covered in deep scars, whip marks, layered over and over again, some old, some new, but between them was something different. A tattoo. Faded. Almost gone. A symbol of a rising sun held in 2 hands. Cale leaned closer. What is that? Nira looked up, then whispered for the first time. Hope. It was the only word she said, but it was enough. Cale nodded slowly. You're safe now. Above them, far across the sky, a slaver scout ship hovered in silence. Its scanner blinked. Target ID matched, signal weak, but confirmed. The hunters were coming. But this time, Nira wasn't alone. The desert wind had stopped, too quiet, too still. Nira stood at the window, eyes locked on the horizon. Her silver pupils didn't blink. Something inside her felt wrong. A pull in her chest, a tightness in the air, a memory trying to return. She didn't hear anything. She didn't see anything, but she felt it. He was coming. Inside the cabin, Cale was checking the power relay. The lights had flickered twice that morning. At first, he thought it was just a bad wire. But then the transmitter picked up a signal. Short burst, encrypted, military-grade. Cale froze. He scanned again. Same signal. Low orbit. Someone was watching. He quickly shut off the antenna and covered the windows with blackout sheets. When he turned around, Nira was standing behind him. No fear in her eyes. Just one question. Is it him? Kyle nodded slowly. He found you. That night, they didn't sleep. Cale laid out old weapons, blasters, shock sticks, one rusty pulse grenade. He showed Nira how to load each one. She already knew. She moved like a shadow. Fast. Calm. Her hands steady. Kyle watched her. You've done this before. Nira nodded. Then she picked up a tiny metal sphere and twisted it in half. Inside was a tracker chip, still active. It had been buried in her body all along. Her eyes darkened. She handed it to Cale. He crushed it under his boot. Not anymore, he said, but the signal was already sent. Far above, in a black ship shaped like a claw, the slaver leaned forward in his chair. His red eyes narrowed as he stared at the tracker. Data. She's alive, he growled. And hiding with a human, he smiled, a cruel, cold smile. Bring them both. The next morning, Cale and Nira loaded supplies onto a desert bike. They couldn't stay here anymore. The cabin had been safe once. But now, it was a target. Where will we go? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Kyle smiled. I know a place. A bunker. Old military base, abandoned after the war. We'll be safe there. Nira nodded, but deep inside she knew the truth. There was no safe anymore, not while he was alive. As they rode through the dry canyons, Cale looked back once. The sun was rising, and in the distance he saw it, a black dot in the sky, growing. Larger, faster, the slaver ship. They reached the canyon's edge by midday. The heat was brutal. The rocks burned like fire. But ahead was the entrance to the old bunker, a hidden cave sealed tight with metal doors and locked tech. Cale typed the code. The doors opened slowly with a hiss. They stepped inside. Dusty, cold, dark. But it was shelter. Inside the bunker, they found old supplies, some power, and deep corridors filled with forgotten tech. Kyle locked the entrance behind them, but they both knew it wouldn't hold forever. That night, Neera sat against the wall. She held a knife Kale had given her, not to fight, to feel ready. Kale watched her. "You don't have to do this alone." She shook her head. "I'm not afraid." He smiled. "Good. Because I am." She tilted her head. "You're stronger than you think," Kale added. "He tried to break you, but you're still standing." Neera looked down, then slowly placed the knife beside her and leaned her head on Kyle's shoulder. In orbit, the slaver prepared to land. His soldiers readied their guns. He stared at Neera's last photo on the screen. "She was mine," he said, "and I will take her back, or burn the world trying." Inside the bunker, Neera stood in front of a mirror. She stared at her reflection again. But this time, she didn't see a broken girl. She saw a fighter. And behind her, Kyle loaded the final blaster. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The ground trembled. A sharp rumble echoed through the old bunker walls. Kyle stood near the blast door, gripping his blaster. His jaw was tight, his breathing slow. Neera was beside him, calm, but her eyes were burning, not with fear, with fire. Outside, the slaver's ship landed with a roar. Black armor-clad soldiers stepped out first, weapons drawn. Their leader followed, tall, dressed in red and silver, a cruel scar across his cheek. He smiled darkly. She thought she could hide. Again. He raised his hand. Breach the bunker. Inside, Kyle ran his fingers along the wall, activating the emergency lock. Neera stood behind a crate, quietly watching him. "She won't stop," Kyle said. "Not until he's gone." Neera said nothing. Instead, she stepped forward and held out her hand. Kyle looked down. In her palm was her old slave collar, broken, scorched, but still shaped like a chain. She dropped it at his feet. "I won't run again," she whispered. "Not this time." The metal doors exploded. Smoke, sparks, shouts. Soldiers poured in, scanning quickly. Flashlights danced across the walls. Silence answered them. Then, movement. Neera leapt from the shadows, slamming a soldier into the wall. Her blade cut fast, clean. No hesitation. Another aimed at her. Kale shot him down. The bunker turned into a war zone. They moved like a unit. Kale covered the halls with fire. Neera moved in close, fast and silent. She was faster than they expected, smarter. Her memory of pain had become her weapon, and for every shout, she had a reason to keep fighting. Then, silence. The last soldier hit the ground. Kale leaned against a crate, bleeding from his side. "That all of them?" "No," Neera whispered. A slow clap echoed through the hall, from the shadows. He stepped in, the slaver, face still cold, eyes still full of power. "Well, well," he said with a sneer. "Look at you. You even fight now. You think that changes what you are?" Kyle raised his weapon, but the slaver held up a hand. "Shoot, me and 50 more will come. You know what she's worth, what she carries in her blood." Neera's eyes narrowed. "She is property," the slaver said. "She is free," Kyle replied. The slaver laughed. "You humans always believe in fairy tales." Then he turned to Neera. "You belong to me." She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a slow step forward, then another, and stopped just a few feet away. "I was a child," she said, her voice low but sharp. "I cried when they gave me to you." The slaver said nothing. "I begged for food, for sleep, for a name." Still silence. Neera reached into her pocket and pulled out a small item, her tracking chip, the one Kale had crushed. She tossed it at his feet. "You don't own me." The slaver moved fast, his weapon raised. but Nira moved faster. A flash of silver. A spark of light. Her hand glowed. Energy burst forward, slamming the slaver into the wall. Kyle blinked. That's new. Nira's hands shimmered. Her body glowed faintly. Something in her blood, something old, awakened by pain, had returned. She looked at the slaver again. He reached for a hidden blaster, and she crushed it in the air. No, chains, she whispered. No master. Then she turned away. Kyle stood beside her. You didn't kill him, he said. She shook her head. He's not worth it. Behind them, the slaver groaned in pain, but his empire was gone. Later, when peace had returned and the stars were quiet again, Nira stood outside the bunker, watching the sky. Kyle walked up beside her, still limping, slightly. You were amazing in there. She looked at him, expression soft. I didn't win, she said. Yes, you did. He smiled. Because you finally fought. For yourself. The slaver lay broken on the bunker floor. His red armor was cracked. His hand trembled as he reached for his belt. Blood dripped from his mouth, but his pride burned brighter than his pain. You think this is over? He growled. I built an empire. You're just a scared little girl playing hero. Nira didn't speak. She stood still, calm and tall. Her body glowed faintly, silver light running through the veins in her arms. The energy she had buried for years was now awake, alive. Kyle stepped forward, blaster aimed at the slaver's head. Say the word, he said softly to Nira. I'll finish him. Nira shook her head. No, she said, voice steady. He wants to die, that would be easy. The slaver laughed weakly. Mercy now? How noble. You were nothing without me. Kyle clenched his jaw, ready to fire, but Nira stepped forward slowly. She crouched beside the man who had chained her for a decade. She looked into his eyes, cold, cruel, and now, filled with fear. You taught me how to crawl, she whispered. But I taught myself how to stand. The slaver's lips curled. You're just another slave. Nira gently placed her glowing hand on the floor. A symbol burned into the concrete beneath them. A rising sun surrounded by broken chains. I'm not your slave, she said. I'm your end. Suddenly, lights blinked from the side of the wall. A signal, Kale's emergency beacon. It had been sent hours ago, just before the battle began. Now, someone answered. A voice crackled through the comm unit. This is Ranger Unit X-17, we received your distress signal, holding orbit. Status? Kale grabbed the radio. Bounty threat neutralized, we have the slave trader alive. Request pickup and arrest. The slaver's eyes went wide. No, he gasped. You can't. Kyle grinned. You'll live. You'll rot. Everyone will know who you are. Nira stepped back silently. The man who once controlled planets would now beg for food behind steel bars. The galaxy would not forget. When the soldiers arrived, they found the slaver chained with his own cuffs, silent, furious, and defeated. One officer, an older woman, looked at Nira and gave her a quiet, brave work, she said. You didn't have to spare him. Nira looked away. I didn't do it for him. The officer paused. Do you want us to take you back to your homeworld? Nira didn't answer right away. Kale waited beside her. She looked up at the stars. So many of them. So many choices. That night, the fire crackled inside the bunker. Nira sat across from Kale, her legs tucked beneath her, staring into the flames. Kyle handed her a warm drink. You did more than survive. You changed everything. She gave him a soft, tired smile. I wasn't strong alone, she said. You helped me remember who I was. Kyle shook his head. You were always strong. You just needed someone to remind you. She thought for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A folded cloth. Inside it, a piece of her broken slave collar. She dropped it into the fire. It hissed, sparked, and disappeared, just like the past. The next morning, Kale stepped outside and found Nira sitting on the edge of the canyon, the wind in her hair. He joined her quietly. "I think the stars are asking you something," he said. She looked up. "They're asking if I'll leave," she replied. He nodded. "Will you?" She looked at him, then held out her hand, palm open, not as a slave, not as someone needing help, but as an equal. Kyle took it. No words were needed. Behind them, the sun rose slowly, and somewhere deep in the sand, the memory of chains turned to dust. The desert was quiet again. No ships in the sky, no soldiers at the door, no chains waiting in the dark, just soft wind, golden sand, and a girl who once ran through fire to find peace. Nira stood barefoot outside the bunker, eyes on the sunrise. The light touched her skin gently, no longer burning, no longer cruel. Her hands were free. Her back no longer ached with fear. This was the first morning in 10 years where she woke up and didn't feel like property. Inside the bunker, Kyle was making hot tea. He moved slower now, still sore from the fight, but there was something lighter in the way he breathed, as if the weight of his past had lifted just a little. He stepped out holding 2 cups. "You watching the sun again?" he asked. Nira nodded. "It feels different now." He smiled. "It's brighter when you're not running from it." They sat on the edge of the canyon. No words for a while, just quiet, comfortable. Then Kyle looked at her. "The officer, she asked if you wanted to go back home. Back to your people. You never answered." Nira was quiet. Then she whispered, "I don't know where home is." She placed a hand over her chest. "But I think it's here now." Kale looked at her, really looked. She wasn't the same girl he found at his doorstep, half dead and shaking. She was strong, calm, clear, free. Later that day, they cleaned the bunker together, fixed wires, rebuilt the walls, not just to survive, but to stay. Nira began carving small symbols into the stone, her language. She didn't say what they meant, but Kyle knew. They were hers. A name, a memory, a choice. She carved one above the door. Kyle pointed at it. "That your name?" She nodded. "Does it mean anything?" She smiled faintly. "It means one who returns stronger." A few days later, a new ship arrived. Not black, not loud. A peaceful transport with a single passenger, an elder from Nira's world, wrinkled, wise, and quiet. He came not with orders but with a request. "I heard what you did," he told her. "We lost so many daughters to chains, but you broke yours." He held out his hand. "We welcome you home if you wish it." Kale stepped back, giving her space. Nira looked at the elder, then at the ship, then at Kale. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She just closed her eyes and listened to her heart. Then, softly, she shook her head. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I'm already home." The elder bowed deeply. "You found your place. That is the greatest path of all." He gave her a small box and left. Inside the box was a crystal pendant, soft blue light, warm to the touch, a symbol of her people, a final goodbye, and a blessing. That night, she wore it around her neck, not as a chain, but as a choice. Kale sat by the fire as she returned to the room. He looked up. "So, no grand journey across the stars?" She smirked. "Not yet." He handed her a small bundle, cloth wrapped tight. Inside, tools, parts, and a tiny metal tag. The same one she once dropped in the fire. But this wasn't her slave tag. This was hers, freshly made. It read, "Nira, Builder, Survivor." Free, she touched it with both hands. Tears didn't fall, but her silence said enough. In time, Nira made the bunker into a home. She painted the walls, rewired the lights, built a small garden outside using scrap metal and old tech. Kale helped. Some days were quiet, some days were full of laughter, but never again were they afraid. One evening, a young alien girl passed by. Lost. Scared, alone, Neera stepped outside. She offered the girl food, a blanket, a smile, and the girl stayed. The same way Neera once had, because the girl who had escaped through fire, who had been beaten, hunted, and chained, had now become a light for others. She didn't run anymore. She didn't hide. She chose her path, and she walked it hand in hand with the only human who had ever seen her not as a slave, but as a soul.